Story 1. I would focus more on long-term goals and less on short-term pressures. I would take more risks knowing I would have time to recover, and I would invest in learning new skills and experiences without feeling rushed. It would be all about pacing myself and making the most of that extra time. Story 2. Just to clarify, you will live to die of old age-related problems at 200. You could get wrecked in a car crash or something. Story 3. Depends on which part of my life is extended. There is a huge difference between being a child for an extra 100 years and being 80 years old for an extra 100 years. Story 4. My body is already breaking down at 58. How would I get to 200 and what would I look like? Just know. Story 5. That depends. Do I get to be healthy for those 200 years? Or do I just keep getting more wrinkled, feeble, and senile? Story 6. Your question is a little unclear. What does extending your lifespan to 200 years mean? Does it mean you would continue aging like you normally do? If that is the case, then at 80 to 90 years, when people are falling apart, they would basically be catatonic and literally unable to move from their bed at ages 100 to 200. Or does it mean that it will be a normal aging pattern that is just doubled in length? For example, we become adults at 36 instead of 18, and the new 40 will be the current 20. Does it mean that no matter what risks you take or accidents you get into, you will not die until 200 years? Or does it mean that your natural lifespan is until 200 years, but you can die if something otherwise fatal happens to you? Story 7. Didn't science recently conclude the human body is theoretically capable of living to 140 years or so? That's already too long. If I had to live to 200, I would take a gap decade for sure. I wouldn't be in such a rush to settle down and be typical. I would say yes to more things. I would get arrested for doing something exciting with friends. I wouldn't let the one who got away get away again. All in all, I guess I would live. Story 8. Would that mean I would have to work until I am 170? No thanks. Or have enough money in my retirement fund to keep me going for another 100 years? No way. No, I am happy to retire anywhere above 80. Story 9. I guess it would depend on how it works. Would being 80 be like the equivalent of being a teenager? Or would I feel like a current 80-year-old and just be aging even more for another 120 years? Because that would be torture. Story 10. Will I be 100 years old at 100 and just rot for 100 more years? Or will my aging be spread out over 200 years? If it is the first, I would just end my life. If it is the second, then I would probably go back to school for something that actually makes money. Story 11. That sounds awful. I have to pay bills and rent for another 170 years? Story 12. I would not have started smoking cigarettes and I would try to have more social interactions. Perhaps drink less alcohol. The cocaine was probably unnecessary. Maintain a better diet and exercise regularly. Attend college. Story 13. Every year becomes riskier. After 90 years, I am going to rob banks with a flamethrower. Story 14. Probably kill myself one day. How lonely do you think you would get? How much could you take? I always found this to be the most profound scene in Highlander, when Connor loses Heather to old age while he does not get old. Heartbreaking. Story 15. That sounds like a nightmare scenario. I would move away from everything and everyone I know and gradually keep doing that for the rest of my life. I think I would get so bored of living that I would probably find ways to only live to 70 or 80. 200 is too much. Story 16. I am not even 40 yet and I am already tired and bored. Even the things I am not entirely over only provide a fraction of the pleasure that they used to, and it dwindles more each year. I also like people less and less. After being betrayed, mistreated, and used by so many, I see them for what they are. 160 more years sounds like a hellish sentence. Hard pass. Double it and pass it to the next person. Story 17. Do I continue to decline physically and mentally from aging? If yes, I would choose a year to end my life. Story 18. I would try to extend to millions of years instead of hundreds. Story 19. I would definitely slow down and savor life more. I would take my time exploring every hobby I have ever wanted to try. Maybe become a master chef, learn to play every instrument, and finally read all the books on my list. I would also plan to travel to every corner of the globe. Story 20. It depends on the situation. Assuming 100 years as the original standard, we are talking about doubling my lifespan. What does that mean on a practical level? Will my current body now revert to what it was half my lifetime ago? Will it age at half its usual rate? Does it mean it appears the same but internally functions like a younger body? For example, do men in this situation have a longer expectation of virility? Are women able to conceive and carry children for a longer period? Story 21. I will probably move from one career path to another and fully experience all my interests. Story 22. Just send me to prison. Free food, healthcare, housing, education, and socialization. Story 23. I would go around selling sugar in small transparent bags for $100,000 each and call it the elixir of life or something like that to people who want to be immortal like me. I would probably have to start this at the 150th year or so that people believe me. Story 24. If I had 200 years to live, I might stop counting the wasted months without rest and focus on learning new skills, traveling more, and pursuing hobbies. Story 25. I would put more effort into educating myself for both my job and personal life. I would also be more selective with long-term decisions, such as looking for a job, a house, or a country to live in. Story 26. I would enroll in law school. I think I would make a good lawyer. I can both think creatively and I love sticking to rules of administration. I feel I have missed my chance because I am 37 years old and it is not feasible for me to try now. But if I still had like 170 years, of course I would go for it. Story 27. Would that mean at 50 I would have the health and fitness of a 25-year-old? Oh shoot, would a 36-year-old have the mentality and maturity of a teenager? Story 28. An idea I have been contemplating for a while, inspired by shows like Fire Rin and others where the main character lives far longer than the rest of the population, is what effect living longer would have on how we view ethics and morality. These people often make choices and think in ways that do not make sense to regular people. Personally, if I lived 200 years, I would be more careful about the mistakes I make. I would have to live with the consequences for a longer time. Story 29. I suppose that would depend on what that extension means for the normal deterioration of our bodies. Do I have to spend about 100 years as a 70-year-old? Or does aging itself just slow down across the whole lifespan? Story 30. My current retirement plan is no longer sufficient. Story 31. I'd start a community focused on nature and taking care of it properly. I've always wanted to do so anyway. If I were to live for 200 more years, I would need to be in nature and feel I am making a positive impact on it. Having 5 wives as the person who communicates with water would be nice too, I guess. Story 32. Mostly nothing. The only changes I might make would be taking notes and chronicling events and various things. Even now, it has been a passing thought of something I wish I had already done. Often I see some people's interpretation of a certain decade or historical event, and I just sit there thinking, that's not at all how any of that went down. In what reality were you living when that happened? Also, it would be nice to have the ability to give voice to the intentions of the time. Not that I am or would be important enough for anybody to listen to me. But imagine if the Founding Fathers were still alive today, and instead of debating the wording and meaning of various amendments of the United States Constitution, you could just ask the authors, even though certain people would refuse to listen to them. Story 33. I would go back to school and pursue another profession as often as I want. Story 34. Invest aggressively. The first few decades will be a struggle, but after a while, compound interest will take over. I would also like to do a long journey and travel everywhere. Story 35. I would live healthier, so I would not have to spend the next 150 years with a body that works against me. Story 36. I would probably have children. More payoff for the same investment. Story 37. That means we age more than twice as slowly. I probably would not have the same sense of urgency and would not be as health conscious. Story 38. Just haven't I suffered enough? But if I cannot die, I will find many domestic abusers. I will tell the police beforehand that I am immortal because I do not want to be in jail. Story 39. Does that mean you would have an old body for over 100 years? Or do you stay young longer? Story 40. Titanium teeth and because I like to smoke 3 or 4 lungs. Story 41. Good health and middle life fitness until 170? Go finish my degree, earn some cash, relax for 10 years or so, then work and save up for later. Story 42. Actually, we are close to solving many of those issues. Since feminism has lowered birth rates, people will live and work well past 100. Story 43. Definitely would not be settling down in my mid-20s. I would travel and try to earn money by investing in stock. I would settle in my late 80s. Story 44. Take voice lessons. Learn how to play more musical instruments. Story 45. I would invest time in learning how to invest money for long-term gains. Story 46. Assuming that my body ages proportionally and does not become incapacitated in the 2nd century, I plan to work at least through age 120 to 130 and invest accordingly. Story 47. Well, I am a bit pessimistic about this because most of the life extension we have achieved so far results in more time spent being old and frail. Story 48. That depends. Do our cells continue to replicate without issue, or will we develop severe cancer, considering aging is the leading cause of most cancers? Story 49. I would have to work longer, paying off the mortgage first, and then reassign money for a longer retirement. Story 50. Pay all the debts and save. Travel the world and have fun. Story 51. Taking much better care of my health. Are you saying my lifespan is getting extended by 50 years? Story 52. I would probably worry a lot less, which is something I did not expect. Story 53. None. I would still be myself. Existential dread would not be setting in yet. Story 54. I can't think of many things sadder than seeing everyone you love age and die. Your partner, your children, their children, and so on. For starters, this is enough for me to avoid this one. I lost my parents at a somewhat young age, and I also saw my grandparents lose their children. Certain aunts and uncles died before their parents did as well. Basically awful. Being middle-aged now, I find myself tired and bored of the repetition and predictability of too many cultural products. Much content is aimed at young adults, from high school to the mid-20s. So every highly praised piece of fiction seems predictable and childish nowadays. It's kind of like forcing yourself to watch kids' cartoons. It's great that the little ones can enjoy them, but my requirements for a dopamine hit are different than when I was 19. Story 55. Twice the amount of time for everything. Nothing really changes. Story 56. It depends. Do I still age at the same rate, or do I experience puberty at age 40, middle age at 120, and retire at 180? If it is the former, I would probably have a plan to end my life around age 80. Most people become incapable of caring for themselves around that age or shortly thereafter. I cannot imagine how difficult and helpless I would feel living a century beyond that. If it is the latter, I would probably buy a variety of stocks and bonds and hold them. Imagine 200 years of growth in your portfolio. Story 57. How do the various eras of life scale? Is childhood roughly the same length, but your prime era much longer? I do not want to be a frail 100-year-old with a further declining 100 years. That seems pretty miserable. Story 58. There needs to be education at different intervals, as a degree earned in your 20s will not be helpful 100 years later. Story 59. Do I continue aging as one normally would? If so, I would be stocking up on nitrogen, if you know what I mean. Story 60. Do I age slower? Because if not, then probably not much change. While some people are lucky to be doing great at 100, most are not really mobile and have vision and hearing loss. So we are still working with the same time frame to get out and do things. But maybe I will finally have time to watch all those television shows I have not gotten around to yet. Story 61. Ask to be put in a coma until they develop a cure for peripheral neuropathy. No way I could endure another 150 years of this. Story 62. I would take the time to study science and earn degrees in physics and chemistry. Story 63. It depends if I feel old at 100. If I would feel 50 at 100, then I would do what I can. But if it just feels like another 100 years of feeling 100, then I would probably just die right there. Story 64. Probably stress a bit less and save as much as I can into savings and investment, since I am going to live long enough to use it once it is adequately matured. Then back to my simple daily life because it will be out of sight and out of mind, but hopefully at my midlife crisis I will be reassured instead of panicking more. Story 65. I honestly do not want to live another 20, never mind 200. Story 66. It depends if your aging is extended as well. Your body becomes less functional as you reach 90. I cannot imagine 110 more years of a non-existent existence. Story 67. I'm retired already. Does this mean I have to go back to work? Story 68. I am 50 years old with chronic back pain. There is no way I can handle another 150 years of this. Story 69. I would go back to school and take my time learning advanced subjects. I am not good at mathematics, but if developmentally my lifespan were 300 years and I am still just an adolescent in that timescale, I would take advantage of my brain's elasticity and learn more about physics, chemistry, and engineering. Time is on my side now. Story 70. I remember in the Middle Ages, the average age was about 33 years. Our lifespan has approximately doubled compared to the Middle Ages. I suppose if we extend to 200 years, changes will be similar but with a longer working time. Story 71. Longing sleep marble 10 sugar scale employ fade aspiring cobweb. Story 72. That 60-year mortgage does not sound so bad now. Wait, is it just me? Do I have to see my grandkids pass away from old age? Story 73. I would try to find a job that helps me develop more friendships. At my current workplace, I have a few friends, but I wish I could extend those friendships by working in different places. Story 74. Go to San Antonio Spurs games and laugh at them still not winning a trophy. Story 75. I have a higher chance of being in a relationship at least once in my life before dying. Knowing my luck, it still probably would not happen though. Story 76. Well, instead of naturally dying in my 80s, I would take matters into my own hands. Besides, who wants to live past 100? I mean, the old jokes alone would not be worth it. Story 77. None. I have just been going where the wind blows and it has been great so far. Story 78. In the words of my father, if I knew I would live this long, I would have taken better care of my teeth. Story 79. In my retired mind, I have to go back to work now? Story 80. Assuming my age slowed down, I would probably be doing the same thing I am doing now. Studying at university. Story 81. Am I to be 80 years old for 120 years or 50 years old for 150 years? That changes everything. Either way, take care of my health, which I have been doing for a few months now. Story 82. Does that mean I have to keep working until I am 180 years old? Will I physically stay the same, or will I age? If that is the case, I will probably end my life around 90 years old. Story 83. I am already getting slow in keeping up with technology, and I am only 40. Story 84. I would start smoking cigarettes heavily to reduce that likelihood. Story 85. Probably off myself. Forget the world if it thinks I'm working 200 years. Story 86. If life were like this, I would still be in my teenage years, so I would go crazy attending parties and using drugs again. Such a dream. Story 87. Well, if you know you are going to live 200 years, that is very different than floating and not knowing how long you will live. I think I would focus much more on education. That is 2+ lifetimes, enough time to become an expert in at least 2 fields. Story 88. I would take better care of myself. Now I am 57 and can barely stand up without groaning and grabbing my back. Story 89. If you had an assignment due in 2 days, and it was extended to 4 days, what would you do? Simple. Procrastinate even more. Story 90. I would need to be ready to invest well, but ultimately I hope to go out of my way to help more people and touch more lives in simple ways, such as saying hello or giving a smile. It is something I wish I did more often now. Story 91. I would do more unwise things knowing I had a longer time to be a functional adult, assuming we age more slowly and not just live longer. Story 92. Honestly, it would make sacrificing, working hard, and investing in the first few decades of your life more worthwhile. It would make much more sense to be dedicated to your job in your 20s and 30s if you are living to 200. Right now, it is not really worth it. Of course, all kinds of economic situations would be turned upside down with that kind of life expectancy. But the general idea still holds true. Story 93. I would live a normal life. I do everything a normal person does, but 5 to 10 years later, and as I grow older, the gap widens. Living for 200 years would be nice, with no stress, living at my own pace. Story 94. I would write a book stating I was there for historical events. Then, in the future, when asked for proof, I would refer to myself at that point in history. I would be that time traveler. When asked why I wasn't at events before I was born, I would say I was sleeping. I pity that I missed the Victorian era. Their macaroni styles were unusual. For those unfamiliar, macaroni meant modern or fashionable. Now that line from Yankee Doodle Dandy makes sense. Story 95. I could finally complete half the games on my Steam list. Story 96. Going back to school would be an easier decision unless everything after 100 is the same as it already is, and you are just a burden expected to pay taxes. Story 97. I would smoke more cigarettes and drink much more alcohol in hopes of shortening it back down. Story 98. This depends. Does this mean that as a 37-year-old, I now have the body and metabolism of my 18-year-old self? Or does middle age, defined as 30 to 50 years, last until age 100? Meaning, instead of retiring at age 70 as planned, I retire at age 140? Story 99. I would put a lot more energy into the idea of going back to school. Story 100. How does my body hold up? Do I age at the same rate, or is 100 the new 50? What is the jobs market like for a 150-year-old? How bad is the state of the planet? Story 101. Work hard to eliminate money. Enlighten and raise the consciousness of every human being on the planet so that we understand the meaning of everything and strive to be beneficial to the host instead of the virus that we are. Story 102. I would end my life at the natural time I was expected to die before the 200-year extension. Living for 200 years sounds terrible. Story 103. I would somehow still find a way to feel like I have no time for anything. Story 104. If I knew I was going to live that long, I would have taken better care of myself. Story 105. I would masturbate once a day instead of twice a day. That way, the instances would balance out. Story 106. Do I live 200 years alone? Or does everyone else live that long with me? Story 107. I have absolutely no idea, but I wanted to give you credit for an interesting and thought-provoking question. Looking forward to reading other answers though. Story 108. I also thought of it differently, as if 200 years of human life expectancy were the norm. How would that affect everything? Story 109. Assuming the aging process has not changed, I would cold start a 0.45 at about 90 years. Story 110. Highly depends on the quality of life. If I age at the same rate, everything past 100 will be a nightmare. Story 111. I would increase my consumption of ultra-processed food and stop exercising. 200 is way too long. I need to reduce that. Story 112. I will probably go back to school. My career is not going well, but I figure what's another 15 years of this experience. Story 113. Same as always, taking it day by day as if there is a tomorrow. Story 114. If our body could reverse aging, then I would pursue sports athletes, either a basketball player or a football player. Story 115. I would definitely think about how I plan to shorten that. 200 years sounds absolutely horrible. Story 116. Depends in what way. Is my aging slowed down to match the extra 200 years? Or am I just getting older at the same rate until I am basically a living zombie? Story 117. I will be happier since my midlife crisis will occur at the age of 100. Story 118. Vote for and invest in better elder care. I am assuming I will not stop aging and getting older. Even if it slows down to roughly 1/3 the normal rate, that still means I will end up in a nursing home for a minimum of about 30 years. Story 119. It depends. Is it less than 200 years for smokers? Or are we all playing the same game? Outside factors are excluded. Story 120. I would probably work longer, to be honest. Let's say the current plan is to retire at 60 with $5 million, which would provide a passive income of $200,000 a year for an ideal 40 years of retirement. If I were going to live to 200, then I could work until 76. Even if I do not add to my retirement investments, they should be roughly $20 million, doubling approximately every 8 years. This would provide a passive income of $400,000 per year at a much more conservative withdrawal rate for an expected 122 years of retirement. Story 121. I'm not getting a job again. Unless we get universal basic income, my lifespan will be until my money runs out. Story 122. I would imagine living in this crazy world until the year 2300. Being a slave for 300 years is unimaginable. The only people who would want this are 20-year-olds who think they will have unrestricted freedom forever. Multimillionaires. Story 123. As bad as it sounds, I would probably make sure I did not live that long. I would be guaranteed to watch everyone I know and care for die. I did not specify the aging process, so I imagine I would either feel and have the body of someone over 200 years old, or I would just age slowly. Aging slowly would kind of suck, as I would watch my friends and family get older and older. Aging normally up to that age would be even worse. Think of how much different things are now compared to the 1800s. There is no way I could keep up with all the new emerging technology. I would be Grandpa Simpson shaking my fist at the cloud for like 150 years, or the baby boomer who cannot convert a Word document to PDF times 10. Unless I made some really wise investments soon or won the lottery, I would probably have to keep working that long. Who is going to hire someone who is 150 if I need to find a new job? I do not see any upside to it, to be honest. I would probably just live my life as normally as I can, outlive the rest of my family, relax for a year or two after that, and then just end it. Story 124. Go back to school for subjects that interest me instead of what I did the first time, which was just choosing a major to get a good job. Alternatively, I would take a completely different path by traveling around the world, looking for odd jobs to do while learning languages. Story 125. Well, I'm assuming in this scenario my body can still suffer from unhealthy lifestyle choices, so I can't go full on debauchery. However, it would be nice to not have to worry so much about being lost at this age. I would take much more time to explore other areas of work and myself until I found exactly where I need to be. Story 126. First of all, I want to be healthy and beautiful. I will be a millionaire. Story 127. I would plant a tree and shape it in an unusual way as it grew. I would also resume smoking. Story 128. Why would anyone want to live to be 200 years old? It sounds like literally hell on earth. Story 129. Buy every Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani baseball card I can find. Story 130. It would be wonderful to know my children and their children for a longer time, as well as future generations. I would probably have more children. Story 131. That 40-year home loan on the front page right now would seem reasonable. Story 132. Will I keep aging for 200 years? I will need to start saving for medical care much earlier. Story 133. Plan suicide at 90. If you have elderly relatives, observe their quality of life. For most people, it significantly declines after 80. Cognitively and physically, friends pass away, eyesight worsens, and the body starts deteriorating. I had aunts who lived beyond 90 and uncles in their mid-80s. At that age, many had trouble remembering who is who and taking care of themselves. I have no desire to live that life. To be unable to follow a conversation, to have difficulty seeing or going to places, and to lose independence. Do you want to spend 100 years like that? I cannot think of a worse torture. Story 134. Can I start aging backward when I turn 100 and live my peak years again? Story 135. I would appreciate medicine to reverse some aging. Then I would go running every day at 148. Story 136. Nothing. I would get euthanized at 70 anyway. Note, I have been doing really well at not ideating, but the thought of living longer feels dreadful. Life is net negative at 70 years. It would be downright disgusting if we lived to 200. Story 137. I will probably develop a heroin addiction in my 80s and then stop. 200 years is too long in my opinion. Story 138. I would probably set a date for my death because living for more than 200 years sounds exhausting and depressing. Story 139. If my lifespan extended to 200 years, I would probably shift my focus toward long-term projects and learning. I would take the time to deeply explore various fields, maybe even master several different disciplines. I would also invest more in long-term relationships and experiences, knowing I would have ample time to nurture them. It would be fascinating to see how societal norms and technologies evolve over such a long span and adapt accordingly. How about you? What would you change or focus on with such an extended lifespan? Story 140. That depends on how I look. If I am 100 years old, look 100 and feel 100, I will probably take myself out because that is ridiculous. Now, if it extends phases of my life so I am still in my physical prime for longer, then I guess I would try and start a business. I would have the time to really get it right and hopefully improve my family's lives. Story 141. 200 years is a very long time to start with. Some changes would involve trying to improve my chances of having more luck in life. For instance, live by the day is a concept that seems a bit ridiculous with such a long lifespan, so I would be more considerate and careful with planning. On the other hand, if you have a lifespan that long and look at evolution, many things might slow down or stretch over more years, like growing, maturing, and maybe even reproducing. I would still avoid the last one, but I mean it more in a general way. A life could be so vastly different. It is already hard to plan my life within the current lifespan, which until now has failed on many fronts. That is why the planning has stopped, and I do not care anymore. With a lifespan of 200 years, I would end it at around 70 at the most. Live fast, die young, relatively speaking. Story 142. Adoption of more siblings so I will not run out of family drama and have plenty of green bean casserole for the holidays. Story 143. Depends on my physical condition. I will live past 75 until 200. Story 144. I would stop postponing ending my life. I cannot continue with this situation for another 160 years. Story 145. I get the feeling that 200 years would not be unreasonable with new medicines by the time I am about 80. If I had that time, I would probably keep doing what I am doing, just enjoying my hobbies and interests. I would like to find some remote land and build a fortress of solitude. If I had 200 years, I could easily build it alone over 30 to 50 years, then just relax in it for another 50 while considering what to do with the rest of my time. Story 146. If I am still in my late 60s in terms of health and appearance, I will have to remain frugal and hope for the best. If I am rolled back to looking and feeling like a 30-year-old, I will have to find a new career. I have worked in information technology and do not want to continue in that field. My house is paid for, so maybe I will train to become an electrician first and rewire the place, then train to be a plumber and replumb the house. I will get a couple of kittens because I will not have to worry about them outliving me. Story 147. Shockingly little to be honest. I would continue to do all the things I am doing now. I would probably retire later, but other than that, I would do everything more or less the same. Story 148. It would change many of my plans. Right now, it is for a 20-year or so retirement. 140 more years? I would have to make many new friends. Story 149. I would feel safe getting either a baby macaw or cockatoo because I would be able to outlive it without worrying about it being sent to a rescue and not receiving the right diet, love, and enrichment. If I knew I would live up to 200 years old, that baby would have a very loving life with me. Story 150. Probably invest less but start much earlier. With compounded returns, you could easily become a multimillionaire. Story 151. I would take more breaks, especially at work. I have plenty of time to advance my career. Story 152. I would start planting trees. I would have more time not to worry about where they are growing and how big they get. I would restore the land that wealthy people have gentrified here in Florida. Story 153. I am not increasing my retirement age by 120 years. It is already far enough away. Story 154. Life extension and age reversal activist here. This means that your body and mind would be that of a 20-year-old. As you get older, eventually all diseases and disabilities will be cured, possibly within the next 15 to 20 years. Ultimately, all the problems we have ever faced will be solved, and lifespan will have no limit. As automation improves, humans will no longer have to work. There are other radical ideas, such as uploading your mind into a simulation or another body. Story 155. Do I continue to age at the current rate? So I am off to dignitas. Story 156. If I were to automatically know that I was going to live to 200 years old, I would have a few questions. What condition will I be in? Will I continue to age and lose abilities, or be frozen at my current level? Right now, I have a high sex drive but no female companionship. Will I live another 100 years horny all the time, or can I have a relationship? What about my immediate family? Will they live long and be healthy? Basically, if I have to be confined to a wheelchair and lose other faculties, then I am not interested. But if I could be in my 20s or 30s for the whole time with the finances to comfortably support me, then sign me up. Story 157. I'm imagining a situation like death becomes her, where my body might start to fall apart. I would try to take better care of it than I do now, I guess. Story 158. Be more strategic with finances by planning for a long and stable future. Story 159. None. I would continue doing what I am already doing for a longer time. Story 160. Considering how lonely it would quickly become, I would probably just take a toaster bath. Story 161. Would half of those years, if not more, be a pathetic existence of some disabled person? So I will pass. Story 162. I guess it depends on how that extension would work. Do I just age a lot slower, so 100 is more like 40 or so? Would everyone else be experiencing it, or just me? Would I know it is going to happen, or would it just be a strange realization around the time I am 50 or 60 that I am still effectively 20 or so? Would my adolescence be comparatively longer? Story 163. Focus on myself and my mind, and free myself to think without the noise of modern society. Story 164. Nothing, I am clearly doing well if I am going to live to 200. Story 165. I would complete my bucket list, which is too long to finish in a normal lifespan. Story 166. I used to think I wanted to live forever, and now I feel like it would be a death sentence. Wow, how the last 10 years change you. Story 167. None. I don't even want to see 70. The idea of an afterlife or any kind of continuation terrifies me. Giving me 200 more years is not a gift. It is a prison sentence. But I have existential exhaustion. Story 168. I would train martial arts and dance harder than I ever have before, and probably spend the rest of my life trying to reduce the suffering of others while exploring the game map. I am already doing that anyway. Story 169. I would definitely slow down and take better care of myself with exercise and nutrition. I am already doing well in those areas, but if I knew I had that much time ahead, I would do even more. Story 170. I am assuming that we have proportionally additional years that are useful. Today, if you could work to age 65 and expect to live to 80, with this change you could be working until age 162.5 and expect to live to 200. 200 is life expectancy, with half living longer and half shorter. If everyone can expect to live that long, we would have to save much more for retirement since the duration is longer. I would focus on staying current with technology because I would need to manage it for a longer period. If it is only me, I would work hard to find ways to stay out of the public eye. There would also be fake identification, with me having money that cannot be readily audited. Looking 50 but being 70 is enviable. Looking 50 but being 105 would attract unwelcome attention. Story 171. What level of functionality do I have in that second century? Are we just assuming a 100-year life is stretched to 200 in all aspects? Am I 50 when I am 100? If so, I am going to be saving a lot more money for longer. My early retirement is probably being pushed off to a standard retirement age. Story 172. Who wants to live that long? Oh wait, social media influencers. Story 173. I would not take my pension as a lump sum but rather as monthly payments. Story 174. See how long my hair can grow in that time, earn the Doctor of Philosophy in watermelons I wanted, and walk from Singapore to Gibraltar. Story 175. Might as well start a centuries-long conspiracy and cult. It is important to have a goal and a hobby. Story 176. I would retire, but before I reach the end of my life, I would step onto the scale and see what a 175-year load would weigh. One last hurrah, if you will. Story 177. 200 more years of this situation? No thank you. I wanted to leave yesterday already. Story 178. Become a doctor since I would finish school at the age of 18. Story 179. Jesus, I am never going to have enough money for retirement as it is. Story 180. Learn to play the piano and avoid using drugs. Do not do both at the same time. Story 181. Do everything that would reverse this extended lifespan. Smoking, excessive alcohol, drugs, you name it. I don't want to live that long. Life isn't fun when you have a bunch of disabling health issues. Story 182. Definitely get a few facelifts for all the added wrinkles. Story 183. Definitely come up with a business idea that pays the bills and more. There is no way I could handle having little control over my time for over 100 years. I believe the government would set the retirement age at 175. Story 184. I certainly would not feel so much pressure to do something with my life, that is for sure. Story 185. Swim every day and weight train. Eat clean and be healthy. Story 186. I might consider trying to find a partner. I like to be alone, but another 140 years seems like it would be nice to have someone along for the journey. On the other hand, 140 years is a long time to spend with someone. Story 187. Go back to school. Pretty pointless now that I am pushing 50, but if I had an extra 150 years to go, I might as well get a better career. Story 188. Do we still age the same? Am I going to be a walking corpse at 120? Story 189. If I stay relatively young for the first 100 years and no one around me has their lifespan expanded, I will be the caretaker for all my aging siblings, including my twin. Then, when they have died, I might find ways to end my own life. Story 190. At 123, I am going to go to England, stand in front of the Queen's grave, quietly say that I outlived you, and dance on the grave. Then commit war crimes. Story 191. Live the first 50 years exactly where I am, exactly who I am. Then, after that, change it all and experience every life. Story 192. Start actually saving for retirement I might be able to afford now. Story 193. That would be the worst thing for me. I am 26 years old and hope that I do not have to stay in this world much longer. Story 194. I would definitely marry someone knowing I have plenty of time to figure things out. If it does not work out, no worries. I will just hit the reset button and spend the next century finding someone who appreciates my taste in obscure hobbies and endless dad jokes. It is like a really long, drawn-out game of try again. Story 195. I would think about tomorrow. There is plenty of time now. Story 196. I had become a sentient lizard. I would crawl on people's walls and lick them. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.